And also, having about wow. I'm gonna have a yeah. What is yeah. Yeah. How you doing? You're better, all right? That's good. Yeah. On that. Hello. How are you? Good. Hi.
Hello,
Keith.
Keith, nice to meet you.
I emailed, in response to your email.
It was while I was driving.
Let's talk after. Yeah. Just coming to say hi.
Yeah, Ron, yeah, nice to see you.
Here's a double meeting this year. Got a super committee she's sitting on. Cause she didn't have enough to do, right? Was that what it was?
That's right.
Good to see you again. Yeah. Alrighty. We right on. Right on. Look at you. Yeah, there you go. Uh-oh, what I do? I knocked myself. I knocked myself over. Okay. All right, welcome everybody. We have some new members, which is really exciting. Why don't we go around the room and start with introduction? Yeah.
Kelsey De Silva, is the father of the Florida marketing assistant. My name is Maeve Fleming. I'm in Cocoa for over 20 years and excited to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Agee. I'm the Executive Director of Melbourne Main Street.
Christina Bourne, Public Information Officer for City of Palm Bay.
Howard Schwartz, Vice President Guest Engagement for Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex.
Keith Winston, to our city. Peter Francis, the Tourism Office. Welcome everybody to our first marketing committee of the year. Very excited to have everybody on board and visiting our offices as always. So it's so convenient. I know.
Yeah.
I love it.
A long travel time.
Exactly.
And I'm Laura Beebe, Director of Marketing.
Heather Lewis, Marketing Director, Ron John Surf Shop.
Pam Rothenberg, Tuckaway Tourist Resort.
John D'Antonio, Deputy Director of Space Coast Office Tourism. Deal with people in the audience.
Dennis Nichols, Anbar.
Rebecca Essek, Anbar. Philip Clear, Tourism Building.
And for those of you new to the committee, Anbar is, what is the official title? Agency of Record. Agency of Record. Yep. For the TBC. Yep, great. This is our first meeting of the year, and I was talking to Peter about our goals for today. It's really sort of update on creative coming up and some research they just did, which we're seeing the results for, which is really exciting. Our job, as I always see it, is to add our collective community wisdom to the professional staff here at the TDC. It's a professional staff, they have an agency of record, but we can give them the intelligence we bring from representing different elements of the community. So a lot of it is sort of listening to what they're doing and making suggestions based on what we're seeing. It could be what we're seeing at our hotels or in our towns or at Ron John's and things that we think are missing. So that's really sort of the role of what we do. And we are officially a TDC subcommittee, so we follow those rules. It's a sort of quasi-government agency, so we shouldn't be discussing these things with each other outside of here, right? Just like the TDC. Yeah, it's a standard sunshine law qualification. So typically, if something is going to be an agenda item potentially, when you're outside of this room, you're really not supposed to have those conversations with one another. So that's the biggest one. There's other things, and obviously you guys did sign disclosure forms for conflicts of interest and all of that, but the sunshine is usually the biggest one to come up. Yeah, so doesn't mean I can't talk to Kim about how things are going. And actually, should we have the people on Zoom introduce themselves? That would be looks like it's all staff members. So I don't think, is there anybody non-staff? No, okay. It's all staff. Yeah. Great. So the first thing we need is approval of the agenda. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed, signify nay. Great, thank you. We have an agenda for today. Any conflicts of interest that anyone's aware of? All right, since we're not doing any motions of business. No. Good. All right, and I'm looking for a motion to approve the marketing minutes for September. Obviously, it really helps if you actually were here on the committee in September. Thank you, Heather.
And I'll
Okay. All in approval, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Great. And we need to elect a vice chair. I hope to be here for almost every, if not every meeting, but it helps to have some help, so. Did anybody ever know? You might win the lottery. It could be. It could be. Anyone want to volunteer? Then I'm gonna ask one of our returning members to step up, since you've seen a little more than the new folks.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Okay, thank
Heather, you want to welcome? Tina, want to welcome, but if not, I'll.
If you're.
Howard, we have we have to.
All jumping.
Yeah.
Really good.
Would someone like to nominate Howard as vice chair?
I'll nominate. Howard.
Thank you, Heather. We have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of Howard stepping into the galley? Oh, no, not the galley. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is that is all the checking off business for today. Really, much of today, the first two items are really gonna be updates from staff on research and creative. And then hopefully we will spend a little time asking them areas of interest to us that we might want them to look into further for our first meeting, their next meeting next time. So with that, we'll turn it over to you and your team.
Very good, thank you, appreciate it. We're gonna go through very interesting results of a visitor study that we just completed. 2,500 respondents, so it's probably the most comprehensive study that we've done with tourists here in town. And I've got a couple of other things I'm going to share, but if Chelsea's getting everything all up and running, and go full screen. There we go. Okay, let me see if my little clicker works. Okay. Working. Do I have to turn it on?
Check the,
No, there is no on button stuff. Oh, here we go. Hey, look at that. All right, and I'm gonna go off of my notes because I am blind from here to there. So, and I can't put around here because I'm gonna click my neck. So I'm just gonna look at my notes. And this, by the way, this is in your packet. You can take this away from you with you, but don't feel obligated to use it, as we can just go off the screen. Some of the study that we did, we were able to, working with our research partner Downs and St. Germain, we were able to determine economic impact and a total visitor spending number. So that part of this is kind of just an overview slide, but in the past, the overall economic impact had been somewhere around the $2.5–3 billion mark. And this time, this is studied, the last full study that we had done was, I think, 18. So this is significantly, 5 years later, post-COVID, the world has changed. Lots of things are more expensive. Hotels are more expensive. And it came in over $4.5 billion. So very excited to see that number. That's obviously very significant. We're probably in the top 10 or 12 counties in the state for tourism. So I know, you've got Orlando, of course, is number one, and they collect $350 million in tourist development tax every year. So we're a little a ways from that. I always.
We're a rounding error. Right?
Yeah, well, I always laugh because, I'll come out and I'll talk about our monthly, and then they come out with their monthly, and they collect more in a month than we do all year long. So it's just not fair. It's not the same. It's not apples to apples. But then, when you look at other counties that are similar size, and even some that might even be a little bit bigger, we play pretty well with some of them. So, and certainly from a marketing perspective, I think we do. From a visitor spending perspective, just under 3 billion in visitor spending. And we also came up with a room night number, which is a combination of both hotel room nights and vacation rental room nights. So nearly 3 million hotel room nights were rented last year. In terms of jobs, just under 40,000 direct and indirect, and just under $1 billion in wages. We're the fourth largest employer in the county, behind health. Healthcare is the biggest. Retail and manufacturing are also very big. And then just some notes. These are some of this data is from Visit Florida as well, but about 30% of sales tax is paid by tourists in our county. About 20% of gas tax. The port recently came out. If you haven't seen it, reach out to me and I'll send it to you. The port last year came out with their economic impacts information. They did a full-blown study. It's the first one they had done in about 4 or 5 years. And I've got the full study, but about 3 million, what I call unique passengers. So my number is never the same as theirs, because they count, as a passenger, they count embark and debark. So you get on, you can go to Bahamas, come back and get off. They count that twice. So I just divide by 2 basically, and then count. There's about, probably of that, there's maybe 300, 400,000 people that take like day cruises and things like that. But most of that is overnight business. From the state of Florida, this is information that came from them, 155 million out-of-state visitors last year, and 122 billion in GDP. So, and 2 million jobs. So you can see the impact and the importance of the state, and you see where we fit in the size of that. If tourism didn't exist, this is a nice little study to use of people, who complain about tourism and complain about, what we do to promote tourism. Hey, if we didn't have tourists, every one of us would be paying $1,840 more in taxes, both at the state and local level, to try to make up for that difference. And I always say, hey, the reason we don't have a state income tax in this state is because of tourism. Okay, so going to the next slide, budgetarily, this is, I love showing this slide. Is to me very, very interesting, and it really tells a story. If you look back to 2014, 15, back then we were under 13 million in collections. We ramped our way up to 16 million in 2019. That was my first year here, and we broke the $16 million mark. And the very next year we had COVID, and we went back down to 13 million. So you could see what the impact of COVID was that year. And a lot of people ask, well, what was the economic impact of that? You take that $3 million shortfall that year, and you divide that out and figure out what that meant in terms of lodging. Because remember, that's 5% of lodging. So you figure out, okay, you figure out what that means from a lodging perspective, but then you also figure out, hey, lodging is about 20% of what the people totally spend. So you actually come up with a number as to what the economic impact of COVID was from a tourism perspective that year. Then, interestingly, nobody knew what was going to happen post-COVID. The very next year, we broke a record at 16.9 million, almost 17 million. And then the last, 3 years, we've been consistently beating our records. And last year was 25.5. And this year, our budget is 27. I don't know that we're going to hit 27. I don't like to be a naysayer, because I always like to achieve the goals that I'm given. But but I believe that was probably a stretch goal this year. And right now we're tracking at about 26 and a quarter, something like that. 26 and a quarter, 26 and a half. That's what we're tracking to. So we'll see. We still have the summer to get. I don't have March data yet for TDT, and then I don't have the summer yet. So those are our two big seasons. So it's very possible I might just be leaning a little pessimistically right now, but somewhere between 26 and 27 million, which means we'll beat last year, and it'll be a record year for us.
And for the record, in 21-22, Peter did take a bet with me.
I did, and I'm finally paying him off.
And I bet we would get over 20 million. He didn't think so. Usually he's a little more pessimistic. That's in his nature.
And the lunch that I owe him is happening in 2 weeks. So. He's finally collecting. Okay, just a little bit more data. We're literally 2 weeks away from getting first quarter STR data. So unfortunately, it is not in this, but in May I'll show it to you. But I expect Q1 should look pretty good. I think we had January, February, we certainly had good numbers, and it looks like March from all our daily reports look like it'll be a pretty good month. It might not be quite the last year, but it'll be pretty close. So I think we'll have a good Q1. But you can see these are some of the things we track from a hotel perspective. And just as a reminder, hotel contribution to the TDP represents about 2/3. So about 2/3 of TDP comes from hotels, about a third comes from vacation rental. So we really look at the hotel very closely because it's a really good indicator of how we're doing from a TDP perspective, but also just from a overall health of the industry. We're at if you look, these charts start in 20, so you can see we started with the COVID year, and you can see the drop both in occupancy and ADR that happened. So the occupancy is on the top left, the ADR is top right. And then you can see we've slowly ramped back up, and occupancy has slowly made its way back up. And then of course, and when you look at 23, all-time high of occupancy those 2 quarters, and all-time high for the ADR for those 2 quarters. So we're going to have 23 was a record ADR year. I think if you go back, there may be years ago pre-COVID that were a little bit higher on the occupancy. So I don't think it was an all-time high, but it was certainly among the highs. But ADR for sure is an all-time high, and that's something that we've been saying for a long time. And we'll talk about
what ADR is.
Yeah, sorry. ADR is the average daily rate, so it's the rate that somebody pays on average for a hotel room. We were in the low 100s, 110, 120 for many years. And we were, saying that one of the things we wanted to come out of our campaigns, out of our marketing efforts, is to try to move that up and move that needle. And when you compare us to other beach destinations around the state, they're all, $200 and higher. And we were in the 120s, and then moved to 130s. And this year will be over probably in the, I think 23 ended up at the mid 140s and going up to 150. I think we'll crack 150 this year. So we're getting there where we are among the cheaper destinations from a product perspective. And that's driven by a lot of things, right? Because when you think about ADR and the mix of hotels that we have in our community, and if you look at the slide, this bottom left slide, that's the number of rooms that we have in inventory. We've been tracking about 10,500 rooms for quite some time now. We had a little bit of a growth spurt between 2019 and 2021. And then it's sort of held steady. And one of the reasons is one of our older properties, the International Palms, which is 500 rooms, got taken out of service about a year and a half ago. And those were lower ADR rooms. So as new hotels are coming in, they're coming in at the higher rate, right? Because they're starting at a higher base. And as you see older properties kind of going by the wayside, that's getting replaced. So the product's getting improved. And certainly when the Westin Cocoa Beach opens someday, 2025, 27 probably is what they're looking at. Those rooms are gonna start at, 400 and on up. They're gonna help the ADR in this whole area. So, that's just a little bit of a perspective on what drives ADR and what, in terms of the inventory, we'll talk a little bit about where we think the inventory is going over the next couple of years in a later slide. Room night demand is the number of rooms rented. I like that indicator because to me that's what you do is you look at inventory, you look at how many rooms are available in every month, every 30-day period, and then you can look at how many are rented, and you can kind of get a feel for what's happening with that. We had an all-time high 2 years ago, and then last year it kind of flattened a little bit, which is frankly that's okay, because when we take into consideration that we had 500 rooms times 365, whatever that comes out to be. I did math in my head earlier today. I won't do it again. I'm 1 for 1. I don't go 1 for 2, but whatever that number is, that was how many rooms got taken out of inventory. And the fact that we were able to stay stable at that same level of the prior year, I think that speaks pretty well for our ability to rent rooms. And I think that's important because when you look at our marketing's about driving demand, right? It's all about awareness and demand and getting people to book. So that's just my little deal.
Peter, I have a question, clarifying
Yes.
question. Is
Yes.
Q1 October?
Q1, sorry, no, I'm sorry, it's not.
calendar
These are
year.
calendar
It
years.
is
Yeah,
calendar.
yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
those are calendar years.
Yeah, it's calendar. I don't do
So
it
it's
by
not the
fiscal
fiscal.
because it messes my brain up to do
Yeah,
that.
I
So,
get it.
Good question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah, that was a good question. Yeah, no, what I don't have is I don't have January, February, March, which is Q1 yet, but usually we get the March report like the 18th of the month. So I'm days away from getting that. So we'll have that for you for the next time. Okay, so we're gonna get into the actual visitor tracking, a little bit about the visitor. And I think this is really important for this committee to understand who our visitor is, who our target is, what are they telling us, where are they coming from, who are they, what do they look like, what do they know about us? I mean, all of these things, we've just been hungry for this data. So we contracted beginning of last year with Downs and St. Germain's, a research company that we use quite a bit when we're doing these types of surveys and this kind of study. And they work for probably collecting this data over about an 8-10 month period. The data collection just got done about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and they were crunching all the data and the numbers, and we just got these numbers. These are very hot off the press, if you will. So 2,500 surveys were completed, and we started with just sort of pre-visit, the visit itself, and then post-visit. So you'll kind of see that in here. 63% said that they had seen some kind of promotion before they came here. So that was really interesting and exciting for us. Obviously, we think that's a good number. When you can reach people who are interested in coming to you, and you can say they saw something from you in advance, that's certainly a good indicator that the marketing is, at least from a reach perspective, is hitting your.
So that's from the Space Coast Office of Tourism.
That's right.
When you say Space Coast.
That's right. Well, I mean, and honestly, we're the only ones that promote us as the Space Coast. So we're the only advertising entity that uses that as a, so when they say, yeah, we saw something from the Space Coast, we know it's from us because nobody else is really doing it that way. But some of the things that they saw from a website perspective, our website was #1. Visit Florida was very high, which is good because we're partners with them and we do a lot on visitflorida.com. Space Coast Launches is us. So that's our second site. That's the launch site that we have. And then TripAdvisor, which everybody knows, and TripAdvisor is the big source for travel information. In terms of advertising sources, so where did they see us specifically? So social media, the websites, of course, social media other, so that could have been somebody else's social media, not necessarily our social media. Billboards, vacation planners, TV, all kinds of different TV, whether it be streaming or cable or what have you. News stories, so our press information that we get out there is seen. And then you see the other YouTube magazine, airport, radio, all here. So kind of interesting. I always go back and forth between, does this mean that we should put more money into a particular medium, or how should we evaluate this? I don't necessarily think that tells us that. It just tells us that there's a mix of media that we use in our marketing, and it's all getting seen in some way or another. And one thing might be more remembered than something else, but I don't know that I would say, oh, well, radio's 10%, we should drop radio. No, radio is a good way to add reach, and get volume out there. So I think this is good information, but I don't know that it would necessarily drive a media plan per se. But that's my opinion. But obviously we will listen to experts at our agency. We'll certainly listen to what the committee has to say. But there's all kinds of different theories about this. And part of it, like just take Billboard for instance. Up until this year, Billboard was about out of our marketing campaign, it was not even maybe $1 million, not quite $1 million out of a $12-13 million budget. Yet look how high it pops up. So it might just mean that that's an impact that it's having on people, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was the driver, right? They could have just seen it when they were driving into the community. So that's why I just say you have to put a little bit of perspective on when you see these numbers, but I think they're helpful to understand that.
Peter, one more question. Vacation planner, is that
That's our vacation guide.
it's your vacation guide?
Yeah.
It's not like travel agents or something like that.
No, it might be a combination of ours and Visit Florida also puts out a vacation guide, and we own the first 4 pages of the Visit Florida vacation guide. We've had that premium position for a number of years, so it's possible it could be that as well, but it's primarily our vacation guide.
Peter, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
How was the survey delivered and who received it?
So, trying to find people that answer lengthy surveys is a bit of a science and an art. It was a combination of 2 things. We did Facebook advertising, primarily targeting people that fit the profile of people that would have come here potentially, and then screen them, did you come here? And if they did, then they got the survey. But also Downs and St. Germain works with a lot of third parties that have panels of people. So they were able to reach out to it was all digital, everything was done digitally. So they were able to reach out through the panels to do the same thing, to say, hey, is anybody, on this panel been to the Space Coast? And if they raised their within the last 12 months or whatever, and if the answer was yes, then they got served up the survey. So it was really an effort to target people that came here. That was the end goal. So
Because I remember a few years ago, there was something we put in our rooms with a.
yeah, that was a long time ago. Yeah,
Right.
5 or 6 years ago. Yeah, we would use the old fashioned whatever QR code to use it. Yeah, we didn't do any of the paper stuff. It was all done digitally this time. Yeah.
Were they incentivized to participate?
I believe there was, I think the incentive was to let them enter to win something, but we couldn't do it ourselves. So that's why the third party was good, because they were able to do that. But yeah, it wasn't a answer to the survey and you get $5 or $10 or anything. It wasn't that, but it was, they could win up to something.
Yeah.
From a demographic perspective, so this was really interesting. We've talked for a long time about who we target and how we target, from a household income perspective. And I've always said, like, when I started, they were really what I felt was kind of on the low. They were targeting between 60 and 75,000 plus. And I was like, yeah, that seems a little low to me. Why don't we push to target people 100,000 plus? Because ultimately, you know, we want to have people who are more affluent. They're going to spend more money and stay longer when they come here. And interestingly, the median age ended up coming out at the mid 40s with an average household income of just under 100 grand. So I don't know if one thing's a reflection of the other, but I do think that in past surveys, when I've seen these numbers, this seems higher to me, which to me tells me that we're heading in the right direction. We're pushing upward in terms of affluence. The next two bullets are super interesting to me because when I started, everybody was, I've been here 5 years now. So, I feel like I understand the market extremely well. Of course, I lived here for many years before that. But I kind of agreed when people would say that we're primarily a drive-in market. And I'd kind of nod my head. I'd say, yeah, that feels right to me. This sort of changed my perspective and really tells me that our marketing is working from the perspective that we're pushing out farther and farther beyond the borders of Florida to put our advertising out in New York and Philly and Chicago and different markets. And it's having a positive effect, or at least it seems to be, because 54% flew in and the rest drove. And 37% were from Florida. And, when I think back to my days at Visit Orlando, about half the people coming to Orlando were from Florida. And so the fact that this is a lower number than that is, I think, a positive because it shows that, hey, 17% from the South, 12% from the Northeast, 17% from the Midwest, 12% from the West, which that's incredible to me. I mean, you think about west of the Mississippi, 12% of our visitors are coming from places like California and Colorado. And so, that all just seemed very, very interesting and positive to me. And then 5% international. We'll talk a little bit about our international efforts when we get into the marketing piece, but that's super interesting that it just shows that people are coming here from all over the place, and we shouldn't have a preconceived notion that, hey, we should dump all our money into the Florida market. Well, no, we're missing an opportunity if we do that. So we need to look at how we distribute our messaging and make sure that it gets a broad coverage. About half had children, and most of them, 60%, came on vacation. About a third of them were visiting friends and family. That was interesting because I was always thinking, well, 600,000 residents here in the county, and if a third of the people that are visiting friends and family, I need to make sure I'm engaging with those 600,000 in some way because they're having an impact and they're certainly getting people to come here.
Peter, is that saying like the 60% that go on vacation? Is that saying 40% is business?
No.
Or is it just other?
No, it was, I think that question was primary purpose. So business is low, it's like 5% or something like that, 5 to 7% or something like that, yeah. It was just, what was your primary reason to come here? So 60% said, I came here on vacation, and then 32% said, I was visiting friends and family. But they might have been on vacation when they were doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, most likely
Oh,
were.
okay, so they offset each other.
Yeah, they're not mutually,
It's not
they're not mutually exclusive.
Oh, yeah, right, well, it is actually there, it's not 32% of
Oh,
the people.
Yeah,
That-
right.
I read it 30 like you did, right?
Yeah, no, sorry, nope. Okay, in terms of what they did, well, no surprise, going to the beach was number one. Maybe not as much a surprise as some might think. Some kind of space-related activity, such as watching a rocket launch or going to Kennedy Space Center. So that was really good. Other activities, shopping and sightseeing, do pop very high in terms of activities. And then outdoor activities like hiking and bird watching, some kind of water sport, surfing, boating.
Cruise is not in the top list, so.
Cruise, we'll talk a little bit about cruise later, but no, they were not in this set, but when we ask specifically how many people took a cruise, you'll see later what that number is, so, yeah. So, and that was a pretty good size number. Okay. All right, so here's a little bit about where they stayed, whether it be in a hotel, 36%, family and friends, 28%, short-term rental, 26%, some in B&Bs or RVs, campgrounds, and then where in the county, Cocoa Beach, Cape Canaveral, no surprise, about a third. But they're staying all over: Melbourne, Titusville, Melbourne and the beaches, Palm Bay, even. So, I don't know that, 8-10 years ago, Palm Bay and Titusville would have popped. So it's interesting to see that, that they really are taking advantage of all the inventory that we have from a hotel perspective. And we get into a little bit of what I call the meaty stuff in terms of, how long did they stay, how much did they spend? Average length of stay is 4.5 nights. That's been pretty consistent. That was about, I think it was maybe 4.1 or 4.2, so it might be a touch longer than it was 5 years ago. But that's interesting to see. 4.5 nights is the average. 18% two nights, and 19% 3 nights, but the rest stay longer. In terms of what they spend, so this is the visitor spending, and I will say this is way higher than it was back 5 years ago. Almost $200 a day per visitor, and almost $3,000 a day, or $3,000 per party per trip. So last time we did this, it was like 1,500. This is almost double what it was previously.
Peter, the 197 per day, does that include their hotel? Or is that just?
This is all spending, so this would be everything that individual spends, but you'll see in the next slide, there's multiple people, so
Yeah.
the average party size was 3. So the
But it
average,
includes the hotel.
right, so if you take the 2762 and divide it by 4.5, and that's the daily
Oh.
spend of a family, of a travel party.
Thank you.
Yep. And then what do they spend it on? No surprise, they spend it on lodging, they spend it on a lot on dining and beverages, recreation and entertainment, retail. So a lot of different things, obviously gas and transportation in there as well. Okay, here's the cruise. No, good. Okay. Okay, so this is about the cruise type. So to your question, Keith, 28% took an overnight cruise. So out of that pool of people that we interviewed, 28% took an overnight cruise. And one of the questions I've always asked is, how many of them stay overnight? And, I always thought it was maybe 50-60%. I've seen studies from the port that said it was 50 or 60%. This group of people that we talked to, and I think it's a pretty indicative, because that 2,500 can get, there's less than a 3% margin of error in that. That's a pretty large group to do a survey like this. 91% stayed in an overnight accommodation. In terms of when did they stay, a fourth of them stayed both before and after. So that was always interesting to me too, because it's like, can we get them to stay before? I know a lot of them are staying before, but can we get them to stay after? And certainly there was a large group that were doing both. 45% stayed pre-cruise only. And then as far as how many nights, 19% stayed for 2 nights, 36% stayed for 3+ nights. Their travel party size was a little higher. So our travel party size was 3.1. I think that's what I didn't say before that I wanted to say. The travel party size was 3.1 in just the broad group. For those that took a cruise, the party size was a touch higher at 3.6. And then they stayed a little bit less, so they stayed 4.5 nights on average for the larger group. This group stayed 3.6, so they stayed about a night less, which is, makes sense to me. They're taking a cruise, they've got other things going on, but their per party spending was higher, so they're staying shorter, but they spent more money while they were here. So that was an interesting thing. And then look at the average age. So remember, the average age was 46 on the larger group. It's 38 on cruises. So the misnomer about cruises are for old people, not so true here. They're actually a little bit younger and a little bit more affluent at 115,000 in average household income. So both of those were kind of interesting to me and tell us a lot about, our targeting. We did last year, particularly, we did a lot of targeting for people that were coming for cruises, meaning we were seeking them out heavily in digital marketing, targeting people that we knew either had looked or had booked a cruise out of Port Canaveral, meaning they had either looked at a website and they've been doing that search, or they had actually booked it. And then we're heavily promoting the fact that they should be staying both pre and post cruise. And so, seems like that approach is working and having an effect, but it also shows they're more affluent and they're spending more. So that's exciting. Okay, I think this might be the last slide of the visitor tracking stuff. International represented 4% of the total. I think somewhere earlier it said 5% were international. There was a different question that got to this, so that's why it's off by 1%. But basically, this was looking at their age and income. So they were 43. They were a little more affluent as well at 108,000. And their main countries of origin were Canada, UK, and Germany, which was no surprise to us. We've been targeting those markets, and we knew those markets were big for us. Business travelers represented 5% of the total. So that, kind of gives us a little bit. We want to do a deeper dive. That's one of the things on our list for out of this study. 2 other studies in the future that we want to do, just because we didn't get as much as we wanted to, was day trippers. We didn't get a lot about information of people just coming over for the day. So we want to get a little bit more data on that, see what they spend, what they do, what motivates them, what might motivate them to stay longer. So we could start to target that. And then we didn't do a lot with the business traveler. And I've always felt like, because of what's going on with the space industry, the defense industry, all of those things, we probably could do more to look at that market, at least understand it. I don't know that we necessarily would have a particular thing that we would do to target them from an advertising perspective, but I think there's things that we could do to understand that market. It might help us a little bit. And then as far as the post trip, I've always said this because I saw this very early on in some of our early studies, that once we have a high percentage of repeaters, and it's like once we get people, they really like us and they come back again and again, and this sort of bore that out. 81% said they're very likely to return, and 93% said likely or very likely. And 90, so that was what I call top 2 box out of a 5-point scale. And then 92% were likely or very likely to recommend to their friends and family. So they're certainly willing to talk about us. And then when they're coming, a third were saying they were going to come again in 3 months, which I thought that was pretty amazing. 24 within 6 months and 22 within a year. So if you add those 3 numbers up, those people are coming within the next year. So that's great to know. Okay, I think that's it for that piece. Any other questions on the survey and the study?
But just for a question, Peter, you showed early on occupancy for 2023, took a pretty sharp dip in the 3rd and 4th quarters.
Yeah, which is expected.
Right? And
Yeah.
we saw that coming. We all kind of saw it coming. We had a lot of discussions last year on that.
Right.
We're starting to see some lead indicators that suggest a similarity this upcoming back half of 24. And I don't know if like Pam in the hotels, are you seeing anything that's showing any similarities with stuff? And
Yeah, I mean, we get a quarterly forecast from STR. They're forecasting occupancy to be flat this year, but ADR to be up. So that's kind of where they are now. That's the rolling quarterly report. So I don't have I don't have third and fourth quarter of this year in that, but you know, so the last time when we get the first quarter report usually comes somewhere in the middle of the quarter after. Then it will, so that'll be interesting to look at to see where they still seeing that, or is there gonna be a little bit of a decline, but I haven't heard anything statewide. Laura just was at a Destination Florida meeting. I think everybody's sort of felt the same softness like the late last year, but everybody felt pretty good about 24, right?
Right, they, across the board, most destinations said January, February were soft, but there's saw the uptick in March, so.
Peter, taking what you said, going on to the third question today, which I don't think we have a lot of time for, but upcoming discussion. It is an interesting question, whether you could look at pre-bookings from hotels primarily and give us like a 1 or 2 month intelligent lead. The last summer, we died after the first week of July, and the heat came and just, we both saw it like this all on the table, right? And the interesting question is, did the hoteliers, and I don't think they did, but if the hoteliers had seen that ahead of time when they're looking for rooms, we could have put some energy in the market to offset that, right? So I'm wondering too, that is an interesting question for you guys to ponder. Is there something we can do with pre-bookings on hotel data that allows us to respond and maybe beat other people to the market and do it just for the couple months lead? And I don't know if that's possible, but I put that on your list of things to consider for the next meeting. Because
and
we didn't see it coming.
You know where I would get that from, Expedia, because they're such a fourth, and certainly in the online world, they're the player, and so in terms of advanced bookings, they're the ones that know. But our booking windows are so close in, or have been so close in the last couple of years, that it's hard to react, because you're trying to pull, let me grab some money and throw it into, well, we're already in the market. So what do? You're going to pull forward from other pots of money. So, it's hard, because when you're booking 30 days, your booking windows inside of 30 days, how do you impact that in a meaningful way without just being reactionary? So yeah, it's an interesting thing, but that's where I would get that data from. It wouldn't be probably thinking about STR. I don't think they have real-time advanced booking data like that. Now, that would be a great thing for them to have, because I think that would help certain hotel groups, but yeah, it's a good question.
It can be throwing money in the market to get more clients, or else just
An understanding of what's coming.
what's coming, so
Yeah.
we don't staff the same.
Right.
There's just a lot, that I just see that as a service that you guys could potentially provide to the sport.
Yeah, no, it's good thought. I'm just gonna kick off the marketing section and hand it over to Laura, but I wanted to share a little bit of perspective on when we started the campaign that we're running and the creative that we're running, how we kind of got there, and then Laura's going to share with you all of the creative that's running right now and a little bit about how it's running. But when we started, this was post-COVID. We brought Ambar on right at the end of that year, and we started in 21. Was when we really started the campaign that we're running now-ish. We've had probably 3 or 4 iterations of creative, so the creative has grown and really evolved, and it's very, very much changed from the very first creative that we had 3 or 4 years ago. But the idea of focusing on beach and space, and being on Florida's Space Coast and promoting the Space Coast, but as an umbrella brand with the municipalities and the other entities within the county kind of being part of that messaging, really came about, and we've kind of continued with that. When we started, the idea was we wanted to pay off the overarching brand of Space Coast. We wanted to have that as an umbrella brand. But we wanted to leverage those high awareness areas, obviously Cocoa Beach, Kennedy Space Center, Port Canaveral, names that people knew. We didn't want to run away from our heritage, if you will, from that perspective. And we wanted it to be inclusive of the entire destination. We're the Brevard, we're part of Brevard County. We're the Space Coast Office of Tourism, so we represent the whole county. We want to make sure that we were inclusive of everybody, make sure that all the municipalities were included, and that we would help elevate everyone. So, if Cocoa Beach did well, we want Melbourne and Palm Bay and Titusville to do well also. And we wanted it to be used in a lot of different forms, and we wanted to make sure that it had legs. So here we are in year 4 of the campaign. So we achieved that one. I can check that box. This was kind of where we started. We had looked at things like, different brands, a lot of different brands, but a good example was one like Marriott, where, they have these sub brands, and those sub brands have some element to them that are unique, but they always have that Marriott name connected to it. So that was an idea of connection that we brought out. And then from a destination perspective, we really liked what the Keys were doing because everybody knew Key West, and Key West was sort of their Cocoa Beach, if you will. But they had Isla Mirada, and they had these other names that they wanted to bring into the fold. And so they managed to develop a campaign that and they've been running this quite a while now, but had that ability to bring these other elements in so that they weren't just so singularly focused that they were forgetting about everybody else in the destination. And so that was where we got to this, which was, whether it be a municipality like Titusville or an entity like Port Canaveral on Florida Space Coast. So on Florida Space Coast was kind of the payoff. That was sort of part of that overarching message. And then from there, we were able to kind of include it. So with that, I'm going to let Laura take it and kind of walk you through some of the different creative execution. There's actually a lot of our creative from this current year that we've been running fall and spring. We're still in the latter part of the spring campaign, but it's still running. So we're still part of that spring messaging.
In this current fiscal year, not calendar.
This is fiscal year. Sorry, the jump.
All right, so we'll start off with billboard. We've got a huge presence in billboards this year. Mostly in the spring, we just ramp these up. So if you've been on I-4 lately, driving
95.
you've probably seen several of these.
They're all up and down 95 Turnpike. Well, not so much the Turnpike, but I-75 more, and some Georgia coming in. Yep.
Here's Melbourne and beaches. Of course, we're highlighting the nature aspects there. And we get Kelly Space Center in there, of course. Palm Bay again, we're highlighting the nature and fishing opportunities. Let me go back. All right, so we'll move into the digital ads, and these are a few examples of what we're doing for Cocoa Beach.
By the way, on the Cocoa Beach, so the Kelly Slater, that's just one of like about 24 creatives that we have for Cocoa Beach. So Cocoa Beach has we did a lot of different creative because we were putting a lot of billboards out. So we wanted to make sure there was a lot of variety to that. And it's got, it's got a lot of beach scenes, but it's also got rocket ship and a cruise ship. And so it's got some different things from the area that are on there.
Yeah, so on these, and there's many versions of this, so I'll just look. So, no wonder.
Yeah, you're looking this way, but that's the computer that it's looking to. So, yeah, one of the things, I just go back real quick, we've used Orlando's closest beach for Cocoa Beach for a long time. So that's just a payoff line that we've used a lot with that and continue to use, and gets good traction.
All right, And so here we are, this is part of our launch campaign for Melbourne and the beaches. Again, the digital that coordinates with some of the billboards you've seen. Again, Melbourne just highlighting some of the unique attractions here. How good to do. Pikesville again. And we are working on some new creative with Ambar that will include, Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. I'm trying to highlight those nature opportunities. And then the Canaveral National Seashore will be included. Again. Space. Palm Bay, of course. And then Palm Bay water activity. That's not fishing in here.
The fishing, I would, I can't remember the exact number, but it's something like 12 or 15% of people come and fish while they're here. And Palm Bay has become very well known for its freshwater fishing. We had a couple of years ago, we had the national organization, what was it? Major League Fishing, thank you. Major League Fishing came and they did an event here, and what they do is they come, they do the event, but it gets broadcast later. So we weren't able to tell anybody for like a couple of months that they were here, and then it actually ran, and we, got a lot of legs out of that. So
That, the left-hand creative, the fishing gear is all that. It's actually, if you fish, right? It's like freshwater bobber, that you never leave. Oh, God. The kids, but the father has the reel upside down. If you're a fisherman, you see that stuff, you actually go, what are they thinking? That creative is incorrect.
We did that on purpose. So people pay more attention to the items.
you are the first person to point that out, so congratulations.
We didn't say you'd be successful fishing. We just-
Well, how do you guys get all the details right?
All right, and. Here we go.
10 seconds and counting. 9, 8, ignition sequence start. 7, T-minus 6, 5, all engines running. 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
So this was, some of you who were on the committee last year saw the storyboards for this ad, and they saw some different, so this was the final execution of that, and we ended up, we had tested a couple of different voiceovers for it. My idea was, why don't we use the original Apollo, just get that heritage and that sort of that nostalgic feel to it, but there were a couple of other VOs that we tested, and they all tested pretty well. So I said, well, look, if they're all even, let's use the Apollo and see how it goes. Everybody I've shown the spot to loves it and thinks it just works so well. So that's the spot that we're using, kind of the general spot for the overarching. And then you can go to the next one. The next one is specific to Cocoa Beach.
Welcome to Cocoa Beach, Orlando's closest beach. Whether you're here to visit Florida's theme parks, take a cruise from Port Canaveral, or view a rocket launch from Kennedy Space Center, Cocoa Beach is your authentic Florida beach town. Surf our tasty waves and dig our laid-back vibe. Relax, chill. Cocoa Beach on Florida's Space Coast, Orlando's closest, tastiest beach.
So that's the reason the spot looks a little different, is it was developed by iHeart. We worked with the Cocoa Beach Hotel Association, and they wanted to do a pretty big buy on iHeart's network, not just on their radio, but across all of their different platforms, including digital and streaming and all these different things. And so as part of the deal, they developed, I think, like 5 or 6 TV spots as part of it. So this came out of their efforts with them. We're now working with them to kind of re-engage our agency and have because the agency did the previous spot. So we said, hey, why don't you let us take a stab, have the agency work with you and take a stab at developing something specific. And so that's our next project that we're working with them on the creative.
And these are running on linear,
That's across all.
ATV, OTT,
Yeah, it's everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah, it's a pretty big buy, so, yeah.
All right, so, and Peter touched on this earlier, of course, we're still, in the spring campaign now, it'll wrap up at the end of the month and we'll roll into the month. Some of these continue on throughout the year. And I think we're ready to roll with summer, right? Everything's in place.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so this is more tactical, interesting for you guys. This was from 2022 data where this comes from a partner that we had that looks at cellular device information and where people come from. We just signed a new contract, and thanks to Keith who served on the selection committee for this, but a new company called Datafy that does basically the same thing, and we're going to run 23 data. But this will be the kind of data that we'll be able to help bring to you to kind of show you as we're developing the marketing plan for next year. But the interesting thing, again, of course, we know there's a lot of top Florida markets, but then you see all the various other markets, and anything that's highlighted is where we have some kind of activity, some more than others. I would say the ones in the top part, with the exception of maybe Detroit, we have the most media in, and then some of the others have been just kind of things that have supported like direct flights that we have, like in Pittsburgh or Nashville. There was a flight for a while at Hartford, or New Haven. So we ran some media there. And then internationally, we run in Canada, UK, the EU, Germany, kind of those markets.
And just for those of you new to the committee, I mean, that service allows the TDC to draw a polygon around property, town, an event, if it's an air show, and know exactly how many people came and where they came from.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I would say exactly. Push it.
Plus or minus.
But good data on where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So if you're having an event or something, it really can give you incredible data on who's there, how long they stay there, a whole variety of things that's possible, just so you all know.
Yeah.
Yeah, not exactly.
And then I wanted to share just a little bit about international because, we've dabbled, I would say dabbled. We've done different things in the international market over the years. Probably the biggest thing that we've done is we have a relationship now with TUI. TUI is a huge tour operator. They're flying directly into Melbourne from about 7 different cities in the UK. And they bring about 120,000 UK passengers here, and that's another piece of research that we're out of this whole thing that we're trying to pull out some of that data about them and what they spend while they're here and all of that, how many of them stay here. But it's a pretty significant impact, and so what we do is we have a partnership with TUI where we put in 300,000. They put in 300,000 worth of media and match us. And we also have partnerships with Brand USA. Brand USA is the national tourist board, if you will, for the USA. And so they do marketing all over the world, and they have a lot of co-op campaigns. So we have a partnership with them when we do different things in different countries. We also work with Visit Florida very heavily in different countries. So all of that leads to, we spent about $1 million of our own money, but we leveraged that and garnered almost $1 million, almost 900,000 in funds back in terms of matching. So nearly a $2 million, like a $1.8 million campaign this year. Also of note, we're working with TUI now, and because of the relationship we've had the last couple of years in the UK, they introduced introduced us to TUI in Germany, where they have a very big presence in Germany. And now we're doing a smaller campaign, but for Germany, it's pretty good. We put 40,000 in there, putting in 40. And so that's a campaign in Germany. So we've never had that before. We're working with a tour operator in Ireland. We've not done much in Ireland before. They're very interested in our product. And this was more of I'll call it a test, because I think we could do a lot more with them in the future. And so if things go well with them, we can ramp that up a little bit. And then in Canada, we had started like in early 2020, we had a Canada campaign right before COVID. And, we had bought some different kinds of media, mostly out of home, outdoor presence. And then we, got out of that market. We didn't do much, the post-COVID year. And then last year we did a little, but we didn't do what I would call a full campaign. Well, this year we said, okay, we're going to do a full-blown campaign. We ran, 350,000 of our own dollars. And then of course we leveraged that with some of the other partners I had mentioned. Actually had a big billboard in Dundas Square, which if you've ever been in Toronto, that's like the Times Square of Toronto, and got a lot of eyeballs on it. And so I think that's an exciting thing that we did new this year. Questions on international?
You gotta go. I do need to leave, so Howard gets to take over.
All right.
Jump in. I apologize.
Right. Appreciate it. Okay, and then this was results information from 2022 that I wanted to share. So we started in late 21, early 22, started using a partner called Adara. They've really grown and become very, very interesting. If you look all those logos to the bottom part of that slide, these are all the partners that feed data to Adara on booking. So what they do is Adara has tracking codes that we put on all of our digital advertising, some of our TV as well. It's not, I wouldn't say it's 100% of our advertising, but anything that's possible that we can put tags or codes or pixels on, we do. And then what they do is they track those devices and see, hey, this person saw our ad and then they booked something through one of their partners. They track that booking. So for instance, that year, this was 2022, we spent almost $4 million in media that was trackable. And then we were able to track what kind of bookings it generated, which was over $130 million in booking. So this is giving us, very interesting data, and we were able to break it out by region. So we looked at like Florida and the southern and the northern markets. You can see as you go further away from Florida, the ROI is higher. The reason for that is twofold. One, we don't spend quite as much in the farther away markets, but more so importantly, those people tend to stay longer and spend more. So that ends up resulting in a little bit higher ROI. Doesn't mean we should, stop doing stuff in Florida and push it all up north. That's not what it's saying, but it just shows the distribution of media is important to us because we're getting good ROI out of those farther away markets. So that's something we'll keep doing. We are still running the 2023 data. The one thing I will say, and on full disclosure, is I don't like that they capture, part of what they capture in addition to hotel rooms is airfare. And so, that's fine for direct service flights into Melbourne, but a lot of people are flying through Orlando and Sanford. And so this data actually included all of it. And so I'm looking to actually tighten that down a little bit and just really focus on the hotel piece. So I don't think the ROIs are going to have quite the same numbers when I run 23, but that's okay. I really want to I'd rather be more accurate. And, but it does give you a feel, and it's sort of interesting data that you can look at, and it shows that, hey, when we run advertising, there's a result to that, and we love having that. And then this is a slide that I show whenever I do speeches all around. So those of you that have heard me do my Chamber of Commerce talks will see this, but this is kind of the future outlook of what I see coming up. That's certainly important from a marketing perspective, but I had mentioned earlier from the hotel inventory, we've kind of, we lost the 500 rooms out of International Palms. We've now kind of gotten those back. So we're back at like 10 3/4, just under that. And I think we're going to, blow through 11,000 pretty quickly and probably through 12,000 soon after that. So by 25, we'll have over 12,000 hotel rooms, looking at about a 20% increase there over the next couple of years. There's a lot of projects in the pipeline. So get to some of the key ones later on, but just a lot of, the full sort of that Hampton Inn, Courtyard, kind of that level Holiday Inn Express type of product. But then there's some kind of interesting ones like the Element is a new property that's going to be opening up shortly. So that won't get us quite to 11,000. We'll get closer when that one opens. I believe that's going to open in July-ish, is what they're saying, down on Melbourne on the beach. But there's some other cool products, that we'll mention in a minute. The port, of course, they are adding ships like crazy. They're actually going to have to expand the number of terminals because of it. But we're looking at having 20 home ported ships this year, with a lot of the biggest ships in the world. So like Mardi Gras is one of the biggest ships in the world. It was for about a minute, and then they built a bigger one right afterward. But for a few minutes, we had the largest ship in the world. And then Utopia of the Seas, if you've heard about that one, that's the Icon class. The Icon of the Seas is the largest ship in the world now. So we're getting the Utopia, which is one of those in that class. So that'll be one of the largest ships in the world. So yeah, a lot of new product coming to the port. From the airport perspective, they added the new terminal. They've added TUI. They've added a couple of domestic carriers in Allegiant and Sun Country. We work with all of them to the best that we can, from a marketing perspective, trying to make sure that we keep their flights full. When Avelo came, we went all in with Avelo, and the one thing I will say with them is we're very disappointed in their business model. They did not, to me, they did not give it a fair amount of time. Their business proposition is they go into a bunch of different markets and then they'll drop a number of them very quickly if they don't see the instantaneous, numbers. Well, I would tell you the New Haven flight, I flew that flight last summer, and the New Haven flights were running in the 80% load factor. If you know anything about airlines, that's a good load factor. They were making money on that flight. The other flights, it was taking a little bit longer to develop. They were running into Concord, which is just outside of Charlotte. We already have service from United from Charlotte, so that was a very competitive market for them to go into. And then they went into a market in Delaware that was, it's just outside of Philly. And, I don't know if that was the right market, to be honest, but they weren't there very long, so that they kind of went in and out. But I don't know, I thought that New Haven flight could have had legs, and I think someday they'll probably look again as they begin to expand. They ran into last year, like everybody did, a real pilot shortage and equipment shortage. So they really had to kind of fine tune their program, and we unfortunately landed on the bottom end of that. But I think New Haven would make a lot of sense in the future, and they may have others in the market. But there's other carriers out there that we're talking to, Spirit and a number of others that we're obviously keeping the irons hot there. And then my biggest thing is Canada. We came so close to having a Canada flight And then Jetlines Airline was the new airline that we had a partnership with, and they were brand new. Not sure they really knew the scheduled service market as well as they should have, and they decided to go a little bit more with a different business model with charter. And then we were talking with another airline that ended up getting bought by a bigger player. WestJet bought. Can't think of it, having a brain fart, sorry. But anyway, WestJet was the new airline that came in and bought this one other airline, and we were like literally the ink was just drying on the contract for them to fly in here. So we are very close, I think, to getting Canada service. Of course, you know, Orlando is the big player, and WestJet and Air Canada all fly in Orlando, which is great. But I think we could support if we could get like a 787 or a decent sized plane. You know, I think we could support that out of Canada very, very easily. We get a lot of Canadian business. We know that. And my next thing about Canada is if we can get that Canada service, I'd like to have representation up there. That just like we have a representative in the UK and the EU that, you know, goes to all the tour operators and all the airlines and, you know, does trade shows over there and all of that. I would like to have a person in Canada doing that for us, but, you know, until we have direct service, it doesn't make a ton of sense. And then just some of the other things, you know, launches, we're number one. We hit 72 launches last year. We're not only number one, you know, in the for the US, but we're number one everywhere. Like we launched more here than all of Russia, all of China, probably combined. So, you know, we launch so much now, and we're going to easily crack 80, I think 80 to 100 launches this year. So that obviously drives a lot of business for us. And then, you know, from a fiscal perspective, you saw the numbers were, you know, hopefully getting up close to 27 million, and maybe we'll catch it this year, if not next year. And then soon on to 30. When we hit 30 million as a destination, we're able to do a public, basically put ourselves on a ballot and get an extra penny. So we get extra percent, so we could do a referendum and do that. That would get us about another 6 million into the bucket. And I don't think of, you know, when you look at like Orlando and Osceola County and some of the other big counties around the state that have 6 cents, it never stopped anyone. You know, people worry about, oh, is another, you know, 1% of tax going to do anything to, you know, well, the consumer from traveling? No, they just took that money and ran with it. So, you know, us getting a 6 penny should not impact our business in any other way, but putting more money in the pot to do more marketing with. And then, so some of the big projects I talked about, the Westin, that's 2027. Margaritaville is right now scheduled for 26. The Westgate Pier is scheduled for probably late 25, maybe 26. I've heard a number of conversations about a convention center in the Vieira area particularly, but other parts of Brevard talking about that. If we get a 100 to 200,000 square foot convention center, John and I've talked a number of times about the type of business that we could drive there, from everything from indoor sporting events to trade shows to conferences and conventions. You know, that would be huge for us. The project they're talking about in Vieira, they want it to be attached to a large hotel. So like a 250 room property. So that would be a huge project. So no names yet, no real line of sight on that yet, but that's something that's been batted around. And of course, everybody's heard about the aquarium. Too bad Keith left, but I think he's spoken enough publicly. I can say they're about 3/4 of the way to the 100 million. They're looking to break ground at some point towards the end of the year. So that being said, I always say, we always have this long-term focus on attracting higher income people who will stay longer and spend more because, they make for great guests. And that's how you grow your market, is attracting those kind of people, so. Questions? I think I don't think we have to have a protracted conversation, Howard, but we're interested, and certainly by the next meeting, which is when, Chelsea, do you remember the date of the next meeting? If not, we'll get it out. It's May something, but by the next meeting, what we'd really like to do is have a good conversation with you guys on what questions should we be answering in the marketing plan for the fiscal 24-25. The schedule will be this. So in May, we'll have, that conversation about what should be in the plan, what kind of things do you guys want to see. Then we'll go away in June, come back in July and present the plan to you. Then we'll take it to the TDC at the end of July, then we'll take it to the board in August. My hope is that they will approve it in August. Last year it got a little extended, but this year I'm really hoping that we'll get it approved before September, because that gives us time to contract with all the partners. And then it gets executed starting October 1st. So, the big thing and Laura and everybody working on it would really just want to know from you is, what things, do we need to tweak? What additional creative, what kinds of things do you think we should be thinking about? What other information can we get? If there are things like, we talked about the day trippers, if there's market segments that you think we should be looking at, hopefully by next month, we'll have the list of that one list I showed you of the markets, the source markets. I'm hoping that we have that. Datify is just now starting. We just signed the contract last week, so we're just getting going with them, but I'm hoping by next month they could at least run out some kind of report for us on that. I don't think the market's dramatically changed. They might shift a space or two, but I don't think they dramatically changed. But, are there any other markets? Like we'd identified Detroit in that top 15, and we just really hadn't done anything in Detroit this year. We were kind of just waiting. So is that a market that we want to do some things in, or are there other markets that look good? So all those kind of questions I think would be super helpful for us. And then we'll put it, we'll take all of that information and feedback, and then we can, whatever information we have, we can put that in the marketing plan and make that part of the conversation as we bring it forward. But Howard, I don't know if you had any thoughts or anything on, because you've been on the committee for a while now and seen kind of how we develop it, and any thoughts that you have either for the committee or for us that.
No, I think what you're saying is right. For each of us, it's just kind of like, think a little bit about some of the things that Peter's already talked about, and what are kind of key questions that you might have for the future of the marketing, any changes that you've seen or questions that you might have on the current plan that he laid out. We always talk about, Peter, a lot about KPIs, and looking at the KPIs, as you guys started to go into your marketing plan, which is always important on these things. So I would just, ask everybody to kind of think a little bit before and come with some of those questions.
Yeah, and it's a good thing on KPIs. Maybe remind me, let's bring our KPI list next time so you can see what it is. There's about 20 items that we submit as part of the budget that are trackable KPIs, and it's everything from media impressions. It has CDT, of course, on there, because that's a big thing that we track. But then it has like media impressions. It has website visits, it has social media interactions, all of that's kind of on there. But some of the things that I think are maybe not direct line of sight KPIs, but things that I want to see are things like, growing ADR, getting out of that, breaking out of that. Once we hit through the 150 mark, breaking through that. And some of that's driven by product, but some of it's driven by the marketing and who you're advertising to as well, and the affluence of the audience. But getting through that 150 and trying to get up into, the higher 100s. things like length of stay over time, I'd like to see people staying longer, we got it up to 4.5, can we get it to 5, things like that. But it's kind of some of those intangibles that, it's hard to say you did that, but I'd love to see those numbers grow. So anything like that, we'd sure love to add to the mix.
So with Datafy, along with the list of locations or markets, do you think there'll be some demographics on who's coming into the location so we can identify besides where they're coming from, who they are, to maybe also be able to target a higher income level and refocus some of those?
Not from Datafy, but probably from other sources. We can get some of that definitely. And I think that the study itself, that, seeing that 100,000 average household income and the average age in the, that mid-40 range, that really is helpful. And also understanding that, about half of the people are traveling without children. So you say half the people are traveling with children, but hey, half the people are traveling without children. Maybe there's a demo there that we carve out and say, okay, maybe we go after households without children as a subsegment. So yeah, I think there's some stuff we can definitely dig into and get to some of that.
And then can whenever you have some of that in advance of the meetings, can that be emailed to the committee members? Do we have time to churn through a little bit before?
Yeah, actually, we probably go ahead and send the KPI stuff out, and we send last year's numbers and result. We have all the results from last year, so we can send that, and then obviously you've got the study in here, but if we can, and as we dig further into the study and look at demographics, we'll send some of that out as well.
Okay, great.
So as being new, is it possible for us to see last year's marketing plan so we can have some kind of?
Yeah, so
idea?
and it was if you got the email from us that announced this meeting, it had the link to the, but if you can't dig it out of your email, just send me a note and I'll resend it to you. But
There's a link in the original email.
there's a link in the email that said, here's the 2023-24 plan.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. It's a long plan. Last year we added a lot of stuff to it. A lot of mostly it's on the creative slides, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on the agenda is any public comments? Do we have any comments, public here or there is none online? So if there are no public comments, then we'll move to adjourn the April meeting of Spaceport Corporate and Tourism Marketing Committee.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Adjourn.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.